Hello, everyone. Welcome into the show. My name is Dan Hafner, and this is a solo podcast today, my friends. I am. If you're watching this on video, don't mind my crazy hair. I literally just got a haircut. I got a big speaking engagement tomorrow. I haven't showered since I got my hair cut just a little bit ago, so it's looking a little wild because I haven't put product in my hair. When I'm done, it feels like a waste because I'm going to go home and shower anyway. So don't mind the crazy look. But today I figured, oh man, this is rough. Um, Today I figured I would do an episode um, and actually walk through as a practice session for my actual speech. So this is going to actually be the engagement, I believe, is recorded. So I'm not going to have like cool like little clips or anything to share or show. But I'll probably be launching this podcast tomorrow, probably right before, right after I go out speaking on this exact topic. So I figured, what the heck? I'm going through it and I'll need to do a rehearsal of this. So I figured I'd just do a podcast about it. So it's kind of like my dress rehearsal, if you will. So what this is going to be is a talk at a event called Pittsburgh Tech Fest, and it is basically all. It's called the AI MVP Mirage, and basically I'm trying to dispel a bunch of myths and kind of help people crack the code of like how do you actually use vibe coding tools in a way that's effective, useful, and you can actually not build garbage. So that's actually the title of this slide. So without any further ado, I'll just jump into the episode, into the actual dress rehearsal speech, and then you guys can get the cool content on this. As always, like and subscribe to the show. All right, so I am going to share my screen with this, and then you guys can follow along and we'll have this here. So I want to make sure I can present full screen. All right, cool. So, yeah, welcome to the AI MVP Mirage, How to Build Fast Without Building Garbage, hosted by myself, Dan Hafner, here on October 24th, 2025. So, why do 90% of MVPs launch fast and die even faster? That's the question I want to answer today. Now, I will say this is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek type of title, as if you couldn't tell already. And this 90% number, to be honest, is a little bit made up, right? I don't have any fast and hard stats that show that 90% or any percent of MVPs built with a no code or a vibe coding tool end up failing or dying. But based on, and I'll get into my experience here in a little bit, on what I've seen and how all of this works, there's more than not, it's definitely over 50% that are just kind of withering away and not reaching their potential. And why is that? Why are so many people struggling with these vibe coding tools, with these prompt based AI ways of building software, when it promises to be like the future in the actual way that things are done? It's kind of a conundrum, right? So the outcome for this is going to be about fourfold, right? So I want to talk about the real landscape of this vibe coding world that we're now living in, not the hype of it. Number two, this is going to be kind of an interesting way of kind of going about it, and it's an emotional journey. When I saw this, I was like, I have to speak on this because it's going to get a little psychological here, but I promise it won't be too deep. I'm not a psych major or anything like that. And it's just kind of this emotional journey every project takes. And I'm going to kind of tie into that. The third one here, the 5 pitfalls of that inside of each stage. I think it'll be a very interesting way to walk through this. And then finally, a framework to build fast and to build right. Right. And when I say right, I mean in the most sound way possible. Okay. So those are really the goals and the outcomes of this talk. Okay. So, first of all, why listen to me? Who the heck is this guy? Why am I up here talking about all of this stuff? Basically, I've been there, done that, right? As you can see here, I have well over 100 no code app launches under my belt. I actually should go back and look at the actual number of that. I think it's well over that at this point. Just because those are actual SaaS builds. Those aren't just like one little workflow here, one little workflow there. We're talking about full-fledged applications. Again, I have a framework for building and launching MVPs within 90 days. I've been hosting this podcast that I'm actually doing, and I'm going to promote heavily at the event that has over 420 episodes, where I've had, I think, probably at this point, over 100 guests on there around the software and technology space. And I've run my own business called Dapper No Code since 2020. Started as a hobby before this in the no code space, turned it into a freelancing gig and then an actual business, and built solutions inside of the fitness, finance, logistics, healthcare, community platforms, you name it, I've built it. And that's kind of why I say all and I show all of this is because um, I don't have any fancy degrees, right? Everything I've actually learned and in teaching here is 100% self-taught. I've learned everything either the hard way or the easy way, right? Either figured it out, a lot of it the hard way by screwing stuff up, by launching things and getting them out there and just finding what works not only in my own applications, but in other people's applications as well, my clients. So that is kind of my why listen to me piece. So before I get into this, at this point, I'll probably do a poll for how many people have actually built something using a no code or AI tool. And then I'll kind of base this slide on kind of what's going on with there. And at risk of reading off of this slide, just this is kind of an idea to just show there's been a huge explosion in this world of no code and AI, which I've been screaming from the rooftops for the past 6 years, and now it's finally getting attention. Um, a lot of these stats were pulled from a site called index.dev, which has been very, very interesting. But as you can see, the majority of tools that are going to be launched by 2030, they actually predict will be by no code tools. Right here, it says 70%. I don't know if it'll be that high, but it's growing and growing and growing. The majority of businesses are already leveraging these types of tools to build internal and customer facing tools, which is exactly what we do and help build with people at Dapper No Code. And then it really helps develop or speed up and reduce the time to market for development time of tools. And then this is actually very interesting. Nearly 60% of custom apps are now built by employees outside the IT department, which again, for any business owners listening out there, this is your shadow IT, right? This is your people who in the accounting department to sit, so, department say, hey, I need a little tool that helps me get my work done faster, right? That's really becoming a very real thing in a lot of businesses, and that's exploding and getting more and more and more prevalent. So it's something worth paying attention to. So here is one of the biggest case studies, and if you've heard of the vibe coding world, you've probably heard of this name called Lovable. You may have tried it or used it at some point already. But I mean, they went from zero to $100 million in annual recurring revenue in 8 months. I mean, that is stupid growth like that. I think it set some kind of records for this. There's actually a lady who is speaking on from Lovable and manages their community that's speaking at this event as well. So be very interested to see what she has to say about all this. But they're like the big name in the space. Not that I'm picking on them or anything like that, but that's usually the name that's synonymous with a lot of these tools. Um, and I mean, what does that show? That it went from zero to $100 million in annual recurring revenue in 8 months. It shows that there is a ridiculous amount of demand for this stuff, that so many people are using this, diving into it, figuring out like, hey, I've had this idea forever. I want to launch this thing. And that's kind of the thing on the right here side is they have this marketing speak of, hey, anyone can build an app. You can do it in a weekend. You can get this thing going. You can finally launch this idea. But just because you can do it in a weekend or with a couple of prompts, should you actually do it that way, right? That is the conundrum that we keep finding with people, is that it ends up failing in a lot of ways, and it's not really the platform's fault. It's the user error, obviously. Like, obviously that we'll get into some horror stories around some things that have happened with some of these tools, but it comes down to the basics. Like, if you were coming to this talk hoping that I was going to give some secret sauce, it's really back to the basics. I hate to disappoint you, but it really comes down to the basics of business, the basics of planning, the basics of logistics, and thinking things through. That's really what it comes down to. So that is what we're going to get into. So real quick, the reality check with this market is that, one, speed to market is through the roof, right? With all of these tools, it makes it so much easier, so much more feasible to be the first to market. If you have an idea, if you have a new thing, if things change in your market, the ability, like people are putting out products so incredibly fast that the speed to market has become like lightning, like lightsaber fast, right? Like it absolutely incredible. At the same time, number two, expectations are up. People's expectations of what software should do, of what things should do, especially in the tech space, are have never been higher. Like people expect you to launch things fast, but they don't. They also expect things to work. They don't expect you to launch shitty stuff, right? It has to actually do what you say it's doing, or they're not going to use it. It's a very, very dog eat dog world out there. You can't launch junk, right? Which is exactly what we're talking about here. And then the third piece is that this failure rate is still fairly high, and I see that every day inside of my business, and that's how I know it's fairly high. So why is that, right? If the tools are faster and more powerful than ever, why are so many projects still a mess? Why are so many people still struggling with this? Why do so many of us have the same shared experience of getting something 95% of the way and not being able to finish it, or not being able to resolve errors, or not being able to figure out whatever is blocking us or get these integrations figured out? Why is this happening? Okay. And it's not always the platform's fault. So here is a diagram here called the emotional cycle of change. This is where I was promising you was getting into some, um, psychological or emotional kind of stuff, which is very interesting. So if you think about it, this emotional cycle of change is the exact way that any of these tools or these launches go, right? Stage one is uninformed optimism. What's this stage? Hell yeah, this is going to be awesome. Everyone's going to love this tool. We're going to make millions of dollars. We're going to be the next lovable. It's just, I can't believe no one's thought of this tool yet, right? Uninformed optimism, stage one. Stage two, informed pessimism. You run into a roadblock. You find out that maybe you didn't validate this correctly. You start to realize, oh, maybe that optimism was not quite as warranted as it should have been, right? Stage three, valley of despair, where you're like, this is stupid. Why the hell did we do this? What the hell did I get into? Screw this thing. I'm done with this, right? So that's stage three. Stage four is informed optimism, where you've kind of crawled out of there a little bit. You kind of got your bearings straight. You realize you overscoped some stuff. You realize, hey, these tools really kind of work in a different way. This is what we're getting into. We're actually building a business, not just an app that's just you launch and it makes money, right? So that's stage number four. And then stage number five is that success and transformation, where you actually build something, which is where we all want to get to, where you actually build something that's successful and working and being used and making money, etc. Okay. So I'm going to walk through all five of these stages in a little bit more of depth, and I'll show you kind of where the pitfalls happen, the lessons you can learn from these, and then that will help build our checklist out. Okay. So, stage one, back to the uninformed optimism stage, where we're all like dogs chasing cars, just like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. This is a great idea. I can't believe anyone's thought of this yet, right? Those are the emotions that we're experiencing in here. So the main mistakes I see myself, like myself included, and inside of clients that I work with, is jumping in head first without requirements, without a plan, and without that end in mind, right? Just how do all of these tools work? You pull up the page and it says, what do you want to build? And you just start typing and you just go. You just do things. You're just flying by the seat of your pants, right? Again, not the best idea. Any software project, any software project manager or developer worth their salt will tell you that's not the way to go about this. It's good for just experimenting, getting ideas out there, brain dumping some things. But it's not always going to be the way that you get to that final stage and that final awesome product. And that's when you're going to run into issues when you're 95% done. So the lesson here is slow down to speed up, right? Quick time check here. Okay, we're doing good. I'm actually probably going faster than I should be. So yeah, slow down to speed up. Get some product requirement documents in place. Get a scope in place. There are so many other tools out there. There's a really, really neat tool that I've been using recently, which is called Code Spring, which is very, very interesting. You can look them up. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but it's basically a way for you to get a very, very robust AI built product requirement documents that fit into AI builders. It's really, really neat. So I can give you guys a link for that here at the end. But this is what happens in uninformed optimism. This is where actually a lot of things die, kind of more outside of the valley of despair place, because of really you kind of don't know what you're getting into, and you just kind of are winging it, and that's kind of how people kind of end up screwing this up. Okay, so that is kind of stage one. Stage two, the informed pessimism. So you think, oh, okay, this is a little harder than I thought. Maybe, there's we kind of bit off more than we can chew. I'm not really sure what's going on. We kind of realized that, like, oh, this is not just all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, right? So again, main mistakes I see at this stage are overscoping, the shiny tool syndrome, and then even platform hopping at this stage, where people start to say, okay, I've given this a few prompts. Maybe I burned through my free credits. Now I'm going to maybe jump to the next one. I tried Lovable. Now I'm going to try Replit. Now I'm going to try ChatGPT. Now I'm going to try different ones. And I mean, that's certainly possible. This was me when I started. Now, when I started, it was before all of the different these tools were out there. These were just like literal drag and drop no code builders. Um, and I did the same thing. I would get to a point where I'd say, okay, I got this about 90% of the way done. It was a running and fitness app. And I was like, okay, I really don't think this is fully going to be the way I want it designed, or this one feature wouldn't work correctly. And I was very, very picky. So that's kind of an extra one here is try not to be super, super picky at this stage, because you're just going to kind of end up in revision hell, and it's never going to be fun. And then, just because a platform is giving you grief doesn't mean you immediately drop off of it, right? Just because you run into one wall doesn't mean that there's a little outlet door on the other side that you can't figure it out, right? So the lesson learned here is define your constraints early. And by constraints, I mean, don't overscope. Like, one thing that happens a lot is people start to go into it. You might do your initial prompt, and then you start playing around with it and testing it, and you say, oh, well, actually, what if it could do this? What if we could do this? What if we feed this in here? Right. And again, that is going to break those constraints. It's going to break that thing, because how many times have you had it happen where you go and you have everything working great, and then you go over and prompt something, and then it breaks everything else. And then you're like, oh shit, like this was not what I had. This happen to a client app the other day. I about shit my pants. Like, it was so terrifying. I was like, oh my God, don't do that. Right. So you have to stay focused. It's very, very, very easy at this stage to want to start overscoping. Think, I want to do this. I want to build this thing out to be 900 different features. You got to stay focused on your core ones that you got to define in your product requirements document, or you're going to run into problems. You just are. You're going to break stuff. It's just going to happen. Okay. So that's stage number two. Stage number three, the valley of despair. Now we're trying to make this more like an indentation of despair, not maybe a valley. We don't want to make it like that. But the emotion that happens here, right, is burn it down. Let's start over. Screw this. This is stupid. Why do we do this? Let's just hire someone, and pay them a ton of money to custom code this. We don't need this. This is just crap, right? So that's usually the emotion that happens, if you guys can relate with that one. The mistake that happens is, again, the platform blame, the jumping ship, and then just quitting altogether in this valley of despair. Just kind of hands in the air. We don't want to do this. This sucks. This is dumb. Again, I think, kind of going back to the other stage, just because the platform isn't being able to necessarily figure out, or you can't figure out that error that's happening, doesn't mean that you immediately jump ship, right? There's different ways to prompt things. There's different ways to work through things. There's a bunch of different AI tools out there that can possibly help you work through this. But, you also don't want to burn through a ton of credits as you do that. But again, this is where the lesson comes into play. Choose your architecture on purpose, right? You have to choose the right platform. You have to choose the features you're building. You have to pick and choose. It's a little bit like a marriage. You got to choose your battles wisely, right? You got to you, you got to you got to be like, well, I could do this, but is it worth doing that? And this is where your user validation, your product validation really comes into play, because you could chase 100 different rabbits, but are you going to catch any one of those rabbits? No, you only catch a rabbit possibly if you chase one at a time. Okay. So hopefully you don't end up in the valley of despair. You just maybe go through a little indentation of despair, right? Because any project without a little bit of despair is like, you didn't learn anything. You got to have some roadblocks. You got to have some caffeine binge, can't figure this out moments. That's what makes it worth it. That's what makes it fun, right? Okay. Stage number 4, informed optimism, is the okay, I get it now stage. Okay, we figured out, why this broke, what's going on here, how we can scope this down, how we can get this figured out. We kind of I've climbed out of that valley a little bit, and we're kind of back at level ground. We're like, okay, we can breathe a little bit. Like this is gonna work. This is gonna work. Again, so another mistake I see people make at this stage is treating the MVP like the final product. So even if you figured this out, you're starting to maybe get this to a point where it's shippable and workable. Is I've seen way too many people that, again, there's a balance here of what's your MVP and then what's your version 2, what's your must haves and what's your nice to haves, right? Because that stops shipping a product faster than anything, especially when we're talking about bigger like SaaS builds, right? Because um, you might be okay, like maybe you overscope too many things, and then you just whittle down. You say, okay, we're going to narrow this way back down to this. Don't forget about those other things you cut out. They were there for a reason, right? But you don't want to just get caught up in saying, okay, we just completely forgot about those things. We're never going to add them in the future. So again, there is a very, very fine line. I don't really know that probably I could have a whole other talk on just that topic itself. Could sit here all day and talk about those kind of things. But again, try to find that balance between your MVP is not your final product, but it needs to be robust enough. Again, what we talked about before, people's expectations are pretty high. So you got to make sure that that's actually working in a way that's there. So again, lesson takeaway is MVP equals clarity, not completion. Okay. So that's stage number 4. And then we probably, hopefully, many of you or some of you here after going through this will get to stage number 5, where you have success and transformation, which is, hey, we shipped this thing and nothing broke, nothing terrible happened. We're all still alive and everything is good, which is where you want to be, right? Now, again, mistakes I see made here by myself and by other people as well is you stop building, you stop iterating, you stop testing, you get a little scared. You're like, okay, we finally got this thing working. I don't want to touch it. Like it's working every time I try to prompt something, every time I try to change something, it's just going to break, or it's going to not be responsive, or it's going to, like, I don't know what's going to happen, right? And this especially happens with some AI things. There was, when you start putting production data and things, or different things. So again, the lesson takeaway I have here for people is the long-term mindset always wins. Like, it always wins. Don't just build something to build it and launch it, and then it's there and it's static, right? It's just like, okay, I launched this thing and now it's hands off. Like, I've done this before. I've launched tools and then, like, literally been like, okay. It's like, it's almost like you check that box in your mind, and then your mind's like, okay, let's move on to the next problem. Let's move on to the next thing. Starting a software is an actual business. It's like, you have to keep this thing alive. It's a living, breathing organism. You have to make sure it's improved, it's maintained, it's updated. Bugs are fixed, improvements are made. Don't stop testing, don't stop iterating, and don't stop building. Are my lessons that I take from this stage. So that's kind of this emotional cycle of change, which I also call the emotional cycle of vibe coding. And it's kind of like this whole thing. So we want to try to eliminate that valley of despair as much as we can, and make it more of an indentation of despair, hopefully. So that is that. Now, let's kind of recap here those 5 pitfalls to avoid. Okay. So number 1, no requirements equals scope hell. So if you just dive in, hey, what do you want to build today? And you start building some things, and you're building something big, and you don't have requirements. Now, this isn't needed for like simple landing pages or simple workflows or things like that. You still want to have an end in mind of what you're building. You don't just want to just do things like a dog chasing a car. Like, I don't know, like the Joker, right, in Batman. I don't know what I would do if I caught one. Like, if you're familiar with that scene, you got to have those requirements, because you're if you never have a finish line, what are you running towards, right? So that's pitfall number 1. Get your requirements in order. Number 2, building for scale too early. I didn't actually cover this that well before, but I think that is one of the pitfalls that I see people fall into more often than not. Is you think you're going to build this, and this kind of comes back to overscoping, is you think you're going to build this thing to scale to the masses right away. So you work on setting up the data infrastructure, making sure that the performance is working, making sure that all of these things that might not be needed in the MVP version are built there. Which again, if you're building a skyscraper, you have to build those things. You have to take into account those things. But with software, a small thing can become a massive thing overnight. And a lot of these tools are really built for scale out of the box anymore, even like your drag and drop builders. Um, so there again, this is a balance. What level of time and effort do you spend building things to scale early versus just getting an MVP out there and going and working? There is a balance here. You definitely want to pay attention to that, but not too much too early, or you're going to end up not getting anywhere fast. Does that make sense? Okay, number three pitfall. Um, Vendor lock-in with no exit plan. So that's one of the downfalls with no code at this point, is that sometimes you do have vendor lock-in, especially with some of the no code like drag and drop builders, like your bubbles, Adalos, Flutter flows, things like that. The one cool thing about a lot of the vibe coding tools is you can export the code whenever you want to. So go into it with an exit plan, especially if you're using a no code builder. What are we going to do if if we do want to move this eventually? I actually have a very, very good podcast episode. I'll have to put the episode number in here so I remember, where I spoke with a friend of mine named Alex Sanfilippo. He built a platform for podcasting, which version 1 was an Excel spreadsheet, version 2 was a bubble no code app, and now version 3 is a custom coded tool. So I went through that entire process with him. Was like, when did you know you needed to, why did you build on no code first? When did you know you needed to migrate? Why did you migrate? It's a whole process with him and his co-founder. Well worth a listen, if you're thinking about using these things and what it looks like kind of moving forward. Okay, so I'll link that, and I'll have a code to my podcast here at the end. Pitfall number 4: ignoring integrations, security, and maintenance. Again, going back to your product requirements document, knowing that you need to integrate with these things eventually. But then, skipping over these kinds of things can be a big downfall. And a lot of the tools kind of come with security built in, but then also ignoring the maintenance that's going to be needed. Or do you have manual processes still in place here? Is there going to be a lot of upkeep? Is there going to be a lot of approvals inside of your tool? Is there going to be a lot of automations or points where, like, failure points where things could possibly break? What's it going to look like to upkeep that? It's not just like when you're building an entire SaaS, it's just going to run itself. A lot of it can, but they're just ignoring that and thinking that it's just going to be all hands off is a major, major pitfall. All right, and then pitfall number 5 is this is very interesting: falling in love with the tool and not the problem. I see this a lot where people start to get into no code, kind of like I did, and you fall in love with, like, I actually like this tool. This is so cool. I'm all in with this thing, and you start to kind of get very, maybe some of you can relate with this. You start to get very interested in, like, how to make this thing work and how can it be better and what else can we do and how this can, and then you lose sight of, like, why did you build this in the first place? What's the actual problem you're solving for the real customer out there, even if the customer is just you, right? So don't fall in love with the tool. Stay in love with the problem that you're solving is the number 5 pitfall. Okay, so here it is at the very end, the build fast without garbage framework. Okay, so here is the framework that we're going to give you guys. So number 1 is obviously define your outcome. Very simple, goes back to everything I've been kind of talking about 19 times during this talk already. Define the outcome. What's your goal? What's your requirements? Where are you going with this? What's the finish line? That is number 1 foundation of the framework. Number 2, map your user journey, even if it's just one way through, right? This keeps your scope relatively small. This keeps you from overscoping, keeps you from platform hopping, and you're like, okay, this is just a mess. Okay, so that's number 2 of the framework. Number 3, pick the right tool, not your favorite tool. This is a very interesting thing, and this is when I had a eureka moment for in my business. Was we were always building tools inside of the same no code builder. And when I realized that a lot of times that's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, or a round peg into a square hole, whatever the way that saying goes. It sometimes you're trying to, it's not going to work, right? So pick the right tool, be platform agnostic. Don't fall in love with that tool, fall in love with the solution and the problem that you're building or your problem you're solving. Number 4, prototype, test, and iterate. Okay. Again, small things that, we obviously don't love the waterfall method here. We do the agile project methodology, prototype, test, iterate, keep building, keeping that thing. It's a living, breathing organism and treat it as such. And number 5, plan for the next 90 days, not the next 9 years. I put this in here because not only myself, but I've seen too many people just be thinking way too long term with this kind of thing. And I really think that 90 days is how I build my businesses. This is how I plan all my stuff that I've seen work for me. And I think it really works in a lot of different ways. If you plan for the next 90 days for what you're going to do with your tool, with your product, with your whatever, it's far enough away that it's a milestone to reach, but it's close enough that it gives a sense of urgency. So I think too many people get wrapped up in that long, and again, technology shifts so fast is what we're seeing. So your plans in year 5 are probably going to be completely irrelevant in the next 6 months, right? So don't focus on the next 9 years, focus on the next 90 days at a time. So that is part 5 of the framework. So define the outcome, map the user journey, pick the right tool, not your favorite tool, prototype, test, and iterate, and plan for the next 90 days, not the next 9 years. That is the build fast without building garbage framework. So that is conclusion of this talk. I want to say thank you to all of you for listening and for coming. And then I do want to just link to one other page here for your QR codes. There is a MVP checklist page where you can download a sheet that I kind of made that has all of this there, since I don't have the slides available. So you can do that on the left. And then the podcast I mentioned, my podcast, Tech Bites with Dan Hafner, you can scan on the right. That is the link to it in Spotify. If you don't listen to podcasts on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts and kind of wherever you can find your podcasts as well. Just search Tech Bites, BYTES with Dan Hafner, and that will come up. If you want to hear more about all of these different topics that I talk about, I have all kinds of cool people on the show and everything like that. So that is a wrap for this talk, and that will be all. I look at that, right at 30 minutes, and I got time for questions. Man, I got this down pat, guys. This is awesome. So yeah, that actually worked out very well. I was able to get a practice session in for my talk tomorrow, and I was able to get a podcast in. Look at that. That's pretty awesome. All right. Well, I hope you guys got value out of that. If you have any comments, please leave them below wherever you're listening or watching this episode. And that's going to be a wrap for this episode, my guys and my ladies. So wish me luck tomorrow. I'm very excited. I'm a little nervous. I'm kind of less nervous now that I've walked through this. I'm definitely going to need some water. I can feel myself being very, very parched at the moment. So I've nailed this talk, but now doing it in front of people is definitely going to be something a lot different. But it should be fun. Should be a good time. So that is all for this episode. Thank you all for listening and joining. And please be sure to subscribe and share this to the show or this channel, wherever you're listening or watching. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Tech Bites, your go-to show for software business and technology. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated with our latest episodes, insights, and stories. Hungry for more? Dive deeper into the world of no-code by visiting dapanacode.com. Your journey to building amazing software without coding skills starts there. Connect with like-minded creators and unlock a world of resources tailored just for you. Subscribe now. Explore Dapper No Code and let's innovate together.